My man! Welcome to the show. How are you? Really excited as a parent and as a person of color to have our guest today. Hey, what's up, everybody? Hey guys, what's up? It's Irfan. I'm really excited to have our next guest with us today. Her name is Ariel Weiss. She is the founder of the Alexander Technique Philadelphia. And she is a very unique person, I think. And rather than me explaining why I think so highly of her, I would rather have her introduce herself, explain and unpack what she does, because I think a lot of people need her help. So first off, thanks for being on. And if you can explain sort of what you do, that would be great.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me on today. So I am an Alexander Technique teacher. We're like the world's best kept secret. I discovered Alexander Technique as a young dancer in college. And I did a TED Talk explaining what happened because I was working super hard. I cared passionately about my dance training. And the harder I worked, a lot of times the worse it got. And then I took this workshop and it really changed not only how I moved, but how I thought about what I was trying to do. And everything got better. I was working less hard and it was working better. I used to actually call it the cheater's method. And I got so curious about what was going on that I moved here to Philadelphia to train to be a teacher. And that was 38 years ago. So I've been teaching for 35 years now. And I don't just help dancers. I actually can use this toolkit to help pretty much anyone feel and function at their best. So I've been helping athletes. I just taught a workshop in Maine at the York Golf and Tennis Club. I help tennis players. I have been coaching musicians at the Curtis Institute of Music for the last 25 years. I teach seniors and help them with their balance and have online courses for musicians and also remote workers. So anyone that wants to pay attention and wants to come more into balance, that's going to help anyone feel and function at their full potential. So I have the best job in the entire world. It's so much fun.
And it shows that you're very passionate about what you do. For those who do not know what the Alexander Technique is, that might be the best place to start. So what are the origins? What's the history? Talk to me about a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
No, I'd love to. So Alexander Technique is named for Frederick Matthias Alexander. And he was an Australian actor that ran into a problem in that on stage, he would start to lose his voice. So our origins start back in the late 1800s when this young man decided to figure out what was going on. So the technique is really a series of discoveries that Mr. Alexander made about his own coordination. And I use the coordination to talk about this very dynamic system of how we think and how we move, which basically impacts everything. So we're always thinking something, whether you consciously are aware of it, right? Might be like how you were taught to sit up straight. I did a TED Talk about that, right? And so that impacts what you think you're supposed to do. And we always physicalize what we're thinking. So Mr. Alexander figured out that there were these sneaky little habits about how he was reciting. And in his instance, he was gasping, which is tightening up before he was going to speak. So I liken that to kind of exerting, if you put your parking brake on and then hit the gas, sadly, you can get the car to go, but not very well. It really messes up the handling and really wears stuff out. It also wastes a lot of fuel. So it's a crude analogy, but it kind of works. Because a lot of times the way we're working hard is we're exerting a lot of tension. We're bracing ourselves and actually preventing ourselves from moving in good coordination. We're preventing ourselves from being in balance. And we think that's going to work better, but I like to question the authority of those beliefs and find out how actually do I attune myself to work at my best. So the technique's been around over 120 years. It's taught around the world. There's been lots of studies done about how the technique helps with things like back pain. It's actually really effective at minimizing people's back pain. And yet we're still not very well known because I don't think we've done a very good job of describing accurately what we do. But it's an educational method. So it's a model where you have to pay attention and you want to learn something. So we don't treat people. We're not medically trained. But when we come into balance, everything works better, just like your car. When your car gets in alignment, even if it's a not very good car, it's going to function at its best.
Got it. No, I think that is a great analogy, right? It's almost like we're an instrument and we might just be out of tune. So talk to me about what the experience for, let's say, somebody like me. I work a lot of hours a week. Sometimes I get to be mobile. Sometimes I'm not at a desk. Now, I invested in this fancy schmancy Herman Miller Aeron chair, and that certainly helps to a degree. But if I come to you and say, hey, you know what, Ariel, I'm just feeling off. Something's not working. I used to be able to work 18, 20 hours a day, which is a whole lot of issues there. But if I come to you and say, hey, look, I am a canvas, I am your muse, or however you want to interpret that, what are some of the first steps that you take when you're working with someone? Maybe let's start there. And then what is the process like to getting them on the path to wellness?
Well, the first step is to pay attention. And honestly, I think that's the trickiest step, especially when we're talking about getting sucked into the black hole of our screens in this digital age. And so at the start of the pandemic, Alexander technique is historically most commonly taught in person, and we use our hands to guide movement. So at the start of the pandemic, that was no longer a possibility. And I pivoted super fast and started offering 6 classes a week online, and I created 2 online courses, one of which is for remote workers because so many people were stuck at home and all of a sudden had to work at home. So that taking a break is actually preventing yourself from just keeping on grinding it out, but actually taking a moment to orient yourself. So in my online course, I found these free apps online that actually you can load onto your computer to remind you for you. Like, set a timer, people, because the likelihood that you're going to keep going until you finish your project are great. So when we take a break, then the strategy is, how effective can that break be? So a lot of times I like to tease people, and a lot of times what people do for a break is some kind of shaking it out, right? And then they pull on themselves and maybe they feel better for about a moment.
Yep. Okay.
But I'm looking for sustainable change. And that sustainable change is that you have to get a little more strategic. You have to get a little more proactive, and a little information goes a long way. So I'm a teacher, Irfan. Are you willing to do a little experiment with me?
100%. I putty in your hand, Ariel.
Because my whole thing, I actually have a company policy, and my company policy is don't believe a word I say. And I'm not being self-effacing. What I'm trying to get at is that I'm a teacher. And for you to learn something, if you sit there and go, like, the likelihood that that's actually going to get in there is pretty small. But if you actually experience something for yourself, then it's yours. So as much as that's like part of my motto, man, experiential learning. So I'm going to ask you right now, right? Check in with yourself and see how you're feeling. And what would you do? What would your habit be to take a break? Would you shake? Would you stretch? What would you do if you were going to do something?
What I do, and I've tried to be more intentional and more mindful about this, but what I will do, we live on Lake Michigan, and literally 50 yards from me is this lake path.
Nice.
And I will, for the longest time, it's almost embarrassing to talk about this, I wouldn't walk the 2.5 minutes it takes to get to the lake. And it's beautiful. And the weather in Chicago has been phenomenal. And weeks would go by and I wouldn't go out and take a brisk walk. So right now, and you'll be proud of me for saying this, maybe not. I will look at the time, I will block out that time during the week, so that I don't have any scheduled calls or anything like that. And I will go for a walk and then come back, get my water, and sit back down. So that's usually like a 15-minute, quick little walk
Yeah.
around the.
Well, that's brilliant on a lot of levels. So nothing to suggest there.
Okay.
However, if you don't have 15 minutes to take a bigger break,
Yeah.
because that's a fantastic idea,
Okay.
what would you do staying in your chair?
Oh gosh,
What would you do
I'm
staying in your
guilty
chair?
of this. Like right now, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
I will just usually do one of these.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Great. So right now, I want you to
Yeah,
feel
feels
what just
good.
happened in your shoulders and your neck, because you just pulled your shoulders back and your neck forward. So you
Yes.
actually created some tension, which felt good to you for a moment.
Yeah,
But now we're going to try an experiment. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Part of Mr. Alexander's discoveries were that when the balance of our skull and how it rests on our spine is interfered with,
Yeah.
it messes up all of your balance. When this relationship between head and spine is interfered with, it interferes with all of our functioning. And I like to say all of our systems, not just our balance, not just our breathing. I like to say our imagination system, like it interferes with everything. So a lot of us are trying to concentrate, right? That's you working 20 hours a day, trying to stay focused. Yes. But try this instead, because if we, instead of pulling your head, which actually went back and down into your body as you pulled your shoulders back,
Yeah.
we're going to use our eyes and act like a toddler for a moment. Do you ever see a toddler looking around?
Yeah.
When toddlers are filled with wonder. I call this baby wonder. And so they look around, and when they look around, they don't look with their eyes. That doesn't look like a baby. They let their head follow where their eyes are going. And then babies also don't do this. They don't move their head without moving their body. So when they move their eyes, they move their head, and they let their whole body follow, kind of like letting a kite tail follow kite. So let your eyes look around your room, see where the light is falling and the shadows are falling. Let your head and your whole body follow all the way down to the chair, and just enjoy looking around, letting your whole body follow where your eyes go, and then come back to the screen.
That was so relaxing right there. Oh my gosh. I'm not kidding. I'm not just saying that because I like you. That really strangely felt good. And I'm not I don't consider myself somebody who's super susceptible to the power of suggestion. I usually look for some sort of science or fact, but that I know what I know, and I know that felt good.
Excellent. I'm so glad. And I'll tell you the science why that helped. Because your spine is designed to sequence, and the sequencing happens from the top of your spine. There's proprioceptors there that alert your spine and say, okay, we're going to go. So when you initiate movement between head and spine by letting your eyes take your head somewhere and letting your body follow, you're activating the length of your spine without what most people do, which is push on it, which is adding tension and actually exerting tension, that bracing yourself. And brakes are good for stopping people, but not for going, right? We don't want to exert the brake when we're going to go. So you kind of exerted the brake, and then we just released the brake by doing that baby wonder. But that's why it worked. There's physiology behind that.
Okay. And that is just one example of, I'm guessing, many other things as folks get into working with you that they can experience. Now, does each individual client have a plan of how long they're going to work with you? What does an engagement look like with you? That's maybe what a better question would be.
It's such a great question, and I don't really have an answer. So classically in the world of Alexander technique, 10 private lessons was considered an introductory course. Some teachers around the world, actually, when you sign up, you have to pay for all 10 lessons. It's never been how I've approached things. So here's how you work with me. First of all, you can work with me online, or you can work with me in person. You can take one of my video courses and actually not interact with me at all. And you come to me, and if it's helping you, hopefully you'll come back. And if it's not, no hard feelings. Yes. So I've had people that studied with me for over 10 years. I've had my favorite success story is I had a student at Curtis once whose back was hurting. He was a cellist, and he sat down in front of me and he said, "My back is really hurting." And I said, "I see." I gave that student one lesson. I taught them about the nature of their foundation, their sit bones. I taught him to balance his head on top of his foundation, and he never came back. The funny thing is, I thought I had failed, and I saw him backstage after a performance, and I said, "How you doing?" He said, "Great, my back doesn't hurt anymore." So one lesson, he got enough information. Now, I don't know if that's all that happened to help him with his back, but a lot of people learn plenty in one workshop or lesson. And depending on how motivated they are to take that information, not believe me, and actually do the experiments, you can learn a
It's
lot.
so interesting and refreshing how you described how you work, meaning, how you talked about, well, look, I don't make people sign up for X amount of classes. Maybe one is enough, maybe two are enough, whatever they feel comfortable with. And I really think that that's a testament to your integrity. Let me explain. So I'm of that same belief, same philosophy. I never want to have a client that doesn't want to be a client, right? There are a lot of agencies out there that will try to lock folks into a contract, 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is. And my belief is if we do good work, folks will stay. And I think that is really remarkable that you do the same thing. Again, I think philosophically we're so similar. That's why I like you so much. So talk to me about a situation where it takes a little bit longer for somebody to find their groove, if that's even the right way to describe it. What situations do you normally come across someone where they need to come back more frequently? Is it that they have more pronounced problems? Do they just not discover? Or they not, what are some of those things?
Well, perseverance counts. May I just say, it helped Mr. Alexander as a young man, because when he first set about trying to figure out what was going on, that was the problem, he could not figure it out. It took him months of sitting and observing himself. So patience is not my strongest suit, but perseverance counts. And so for one thing, I try to make it fun. And I try to get people to have a sense of humor, because what we're doing is habit busting.
Okay.
And habit busting is not the easiest thing, by the way. And people can sometimes really start to beat themselves up. And I have yet to meet anyone that needs more tools to do that. People are already good at that. And so making things playful, making discovery, actually celebrating discovery, even if what you're discovering is that you've been applying your parking brake and didn't know it, right? And really just constantly reframing things so that people feel that they can dip their toe in, and also normalizing that this can be really mysterious and subtle and people don't get it right away. Letting people know that's really, really normal. But also, I think this is why Alexander Technique isn't so widely known, is that we've kind of kept it kind of mysterious. Oh, yes, you can't possibly know what's going on. And I don't think that's a healthy relationship with my pupils. I'm much more interested in acting as a good guide to promote the agency of my students. The last 3 years has had a profound impact on me as a human being and as an educator. I'm really trying to educate myself post George Floyd, may I just say, trying to educate myself and really understanding my role as an educator and what that means to me and what I want it to be. So one way that I work, which is not a classical way in the Alexander Technique world, is I do what's called activity work. And what does that mean? It means I don't really care if you have good posture because who cares? You might care, because if you're going to stand in front of a judge or a boardroom and you're all slumped over and slack, you're not as believable, right? If you're trying to sing that way, your voice isn't going to make it to the end of the hall. So knowing your purpose and letting your coordination help you serve your purpose, well, that I'm very interested in. But I want to follow your purpose. And so one way I help people who are maybe struggling a little bit, because a lot of what I'm doing is getting people to pay attention kinesthetically. People don't even know they have a kinesthetic sense. So proprioception is that internal sense of movement and effort and proportion, like where you are in space. All of that is proprioceptive information. And we've mostly shut it out for most of us. It's been trained out of us. In my TED Talk, I talk about how when we were kids, we were sent to school. First thing they say is sit still all day long. Well, if you're successful in doing that, you kind of have to shut down your proprioception, because that's certainly not what you want to do. No toddler sits still all day, not unless something's really wrong with them. So this idea of taking something you want, maybe that's you want your back to stop hurting. Maybe that's you want to improve your tennis swing. Maybe it's that you want to feel more at peace in your own skin. Right? So I take what's important to you, and then we find an experiment so you get to tell whether what I'm showing you helps you achieve your goal, not mine.
Got it.
So for me, again, in that TED Talk, I wanted to balance on one leg. Dancers spend hours training to stand on one leg, and the longer the better. Yes. But when I was trying harder, I was getting worse until I changed my thinking. I changed the strategy. And then I was shocked. I was like, how can that work better? But it did. And because it worked better, that got my attention. So I'm constantly looking for what works better. And you get to decide what works better, right? Which is why I can help musicians, even though I don't read music, because they know what they're after. And when you come into balance, everything works better.
So talk to me about remote workers. Where do you find that they struggle the most, and what's been your success in working with them?
Well, I think the number one problem is that we don't pay attention to ourselves. We get sucked into our screen and we ignore any other information about the space around us or internally. So that's the number one problem. And how do I get people to actually include themselves? So again, right now in this very moment, as you're looking at the screen, one thing we can do is not just look at the plane of the screen, but actually look into the space behind the person. You don't have your background blurred, so I can see a lot of light coming in behind you. And I can see in the back of my space, I've got all kinds of fun things behind me, including Fred, my skeleton. Yes. So to start to look three-dimensionally at your screen, but also the space behind your screen.
Okay.
And also peripherally, like not shutting out that information coming in from the sides. I've got sunlight coming in from one side, and I've got a mirror over on that side. And then I get people to start to kind of ground themselves in tactile information, touch, right? So just tap your feet on the floor, and you can rock your sit bones to kind of wake up a sense. And where are your arms touching your body? Right. So you can kind of wake up, right? That touch information was there. You just weren't necessarily paying attention to it.
Oh my gosh.
I know, it kind of changes how you see the screen, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Right. So that's attending to what we pay attention to, that inclusive attention. And then I really talk to people about movement. So as long as you're alive, you're moving. So there's always a quality to that movement. So when we're sitting at a computer, most commonly people sit on the back of their sit bones and they pull their legs in. And that's why when you stand up, your legs are kind of achy sometimes or tired. And sometimes people get that back pull
Yeah.
because they don't realize they've been pulling on themselves the whole time. So when I sit at a computer, I'm sitting on a high stool. That's what works well for me. But I encourage people to do a movement like this, where you're moving from your hip joints. So every moment, maybe when you're thinking about what to say next, you can just do a little tiny bit of movement from your hips just to free things up. And that kind of recenters you on the top of your sit bones, right? So taking those little micro movement breaks, again, it's great that you use that path and take advantage of living in such a beautiful place and going for a walk. Excellent idea, but don't make it all or nothing. It's like,
True.
oh, I didn't do my workout today. Well, I have 5 seconds to look around my space. I have 5 seconds to free up my legs in relationship to my torso. Those little mini breaks can make a huge difference.
Wow. Absolutely fascinating. And so simple, right? Like once you feel it, you're like, oh, that actually works. It's just a matter of doing it consistently. So I see that you've got a number of contraptions behind you. What are the Bozu balls used for, or the Pilates balls? Or I'm not even sure what the name is anymore. But talk to me about the different modalities that you're utilizing.
Well, my background is in dance and movement,
Okay.
and I'm just fascinated by how the world moves. And so I'm constantly pulling from all the many things I've trained as a movement person. So I studied things like idiokinesis, Bartinia fundamentals, I've studied Tai Chi. And so I'm often trying to trick people out of their habits of interference, like that parking brake, by
Mhm.
having them have a new movement experience. So we'll use the balls to sit on to allow movement in our hips so that we're not, again, bracing our legs and our hips and our back. I have a table. Sometimes people lay on the table. It's called table work, fancy name. And Alexander teachers, we use our hands to just help decompress people and teach people how to kind of constructively rest. Oh, I've got all kinds of toys and all kinds of things around here. I'm
Cool.
constantly modeling movement and having people experiment with movement in their own bodies and making analogies. We move around a lot.
How long is a typical session? Like the time from when somebody hops on a Zoom call to when they're like, okay, that's
Yeah, my online classes are an hour long and private lessons are 45 minutes. Most
okay.
commonly, people come once a week, but I encourage people to find out the pacing that works well for them. When people are struggling with a more acute situation, sometimes they'll come 2 or more times a week.
Mhm.
And I have some students that are such good self-learners, they'll come for a lesson a month, maybe 2 a month, because
Okay.
they're off using that information. Some
Got it.
other people find they need more reminders, so they'll come more frequently.
Got it. Got it. Good to know. What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Well, the best thing is to check out my website, which is www.atphila.com. A-T for Alexander Technique, Phila for Philadelphia.com. There's all kinds of information. You can also reach out to me at ariel@atphila.com. I'm also on social media, thanks to Rooster Lee. AT_Phila is my Instagram, and Alexander Technique Philadelphia is my Facebook. I think I got
Very
that
cool.
all.
A couple more questions that I wanted to get out of the way and get your thoughts on. How do you incorporate purpose into your work? You're clearly very passionate. You do a lot of good. How do you, and you're just a very positive person. Every time I've chatted with you, I get that positive energy from you. How do you incorporate purpose into your work and make your work worthwhile?
That's a big question.
Mhm.
So I think of that really from two sides, that I feel so fortunate that in my life, I've gotten to see those sides kind of merge. And what I mean is there's a concept, I think it comes from Zen Buddhism, about right livelihood, which is about how is my purpose about what I'm offering good for the world, but good for me as well. And so that dance training from age 4, right? That fascination and love of just movement, right? Is really my purpose in life. Like that's my happy place. I'm still dancing, people. I'm 63 and every chance I get, I am out dancing because that's joyous for me. And I'm still studying dance technique because I love to refine what I do. I have more fun when I do my West Coast swing dancing. So that realizing that's who I am in my essence. And then how do I help people feel and function at their best? I got to tell you, the thrill is not gone. Like what I know about how we think and move can help people live their best lives. And that's thrilling for me.
Wow.
So my purpose is to help people know they have some choices. You know, a lot of times people come and say, I have a bad shoulder, or I'm old, or I'm overweight. And it feels like a life sentence to me. And I'm like, it's not a life sentence. You have some choices. And no doubt we all have some compromises and challenges. That's called having a life.
Mhm.
But this ability to turn even a smidge and make a constructive choice. So I can't always, I can't control what's going to happen to me, like things happen. But
Right.
I have some choices about how I respond.
Got
And
it.
that's really the essence of what Mr. Alexander's discoveries are about. I have some choices about how I respond. And that's powerful and magical and thrilling and simple.
Yeah. No, I love that. What are some of your biggest challenges?
Well, I think a lot of the challenges now for me are about balancing the technological challenges. Like I'm not a digital native, people, right?
Right.
And I
Right.
am challenged by all those learning curves, especially the last 3 years. And
Got
also
it.
balancing how much time I spend on all that. The administrative and the technology stuff is like starts to feel like a burden. And
Yep.
so how to actually find the right people to help me, how to balance that out, and how to let more people know, about what I do. Those are my biggest challenges.
How do you see your role changing in the next 12 to 24 months?
Well, I've been thinking a lot about that and really thinking about what I have to offer, not just clients that may come find me, but in the Alexander world. Like I'm really kind of thinking about how I approach this work and what do I uniquely bring to the Alexander world, and really thinking about mentoring more and being even more upfront about what I do. Again, the pandemic was this crazy opportunity. I did a TED Talk. That's a really big stage. And I started
Beautiful.
my own podcast for musicians and music educators. And I've been so much more public online with my reels and my, Facebook lives and all kinds of things. So thinking more and more about what kind of legacy do I want to leave in this world? Yeah.
Very thoughtful. Is there a book that you've read that's had an impact on you that you would recommend to others?
Well, I'm still finishing a book that had a huge impact on me. It's called Marjorie Barstow and the Alexander Technique. I'm
Okay.
not sure if other people are going to be so interested in this book. It's an academic book about my mentor, Marge Barstow, but it's
Okay.
been blowing my mind. It's been
Okay.
blowing my mind because it's giving me an academic construct about why Marge's teaching was as brilliant and as innovative as it was. So it's linking and getting me super excited to do more research about her interactions with John Dewey, the American educator and philosopher. And it's leading me down this path to do more studying about pragmatism, which was kind of Dewey's jam. And this idea of making ideas simple and understandable, right? So I'm like right in the middle of having my head blown. And what's really interesting to me is I'm reading this woman's superb book, and I just published a paper because I was presenting in Berlin last summer at an international Alexander Technique Congress. So I published a paper about my workshop.
Yeah.
And I reached so many of the same conclusions, and I'm no academic. But
Really?
it's so interesting to see the background and the context of what I intuitively already knew. But
Love it.
it's deepening my understanding. So, and I'm not gonna, it's not a book, but I was in a workshop this week. Inspiration comes from everywhere, people. So when I was in Albuquerque, I went to see 11 flamenco shows in 9 days.
Oh my gosh.
It was amazing. And there was one performer that had me in tears. This woman was so powerful and so expressive and so owned every bit of herself. It brought me to tears.
Really?
And her name is Raquel Heredia.
Okay.
And to my great fortune, Raquel is here in Philadelphia this week teaching workshops.
Oh gosh.
So I studied flamenco dance before the pandemic, not very long. I am a very beginning flamenco student, but I put myself in that studio because I wanted to be in the room with her.
Really?
And so I was in a room with Raquel Heredia. I was fan crushing on her big time. Yes, I got a selfie. And she's speaking in Spanish, and boy, do I wish I spoke Spanish. But the little bit of translation I got, she started talking about, you can't just execute a step. You have to feel it. And I was almost in tears again, because she's talking about what I care so passionately about, that agency of someone fulfilling their own purpose. Right.
Wow.
So lucky
That-
me, so much inspiration.
So the title of the book, I read the subtitle. It's Critical Thinking in Performing Arts Pedagogy. Sounds like a real page turner. Would you recommend?
No, it's not where I would suggest starting for a
Okay.
book about Alexander Technique.
But I still okay. No, that's fair. I will look up Raquel Heredia and check her out. Maybe she's on YouTube. I don't know.
She is. She's stunning, not to be missed.
Okay, I will definitely check it out. Well, listen, Ariel, it's always such a pleasure to connect with you. I found this, enlightening. It's delightful to chat with you and learn about what you do, because it's so different from the typical conversations that I'm having about technology or social media. Very, very last question is, you've been a Roosterly client for a little while. Why do you like us? Why do you choose to work with us?
Well, for me, it's just a tremendous help to take some of that technology struggles off my plate, because I'm not adept at it. And so it would take me 10 times longer and kind of really bog me down. And so to take that off my plate, and, we live in a digital age, and so many of my colleagues, even younger than me in the Alexander world, really have their head in the sand about not using those technological platforms that are available to us. And so Roosterly just helps me be in this modern age in my own voice, right? I so appreciate your flexibility, because what I do is unique. And so I'm kind of fussy about my brand. And so to partner with Roosterly to get my voice out into the world is just a tremendous help. So thank you.
Very cool, very cool. Well, our whole team enjoys working with you. I think we all have our favorite clients, and I know that the team that's working on your account really does enjoy it, and they like you a lot. So it definitely goes both ways. So Ariel, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to connect. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.